Welcome to the Graduate Job Podcast, your home for weekly information and inspiration to help you get the graduate job of your dreams.
Hello and welcome to the Graduate Job Podcast with your host, James Curran. The Graduate Job Podcast is your home for all things related to helping you on your journey to find that amazing job. Each episode I bring together the best minds in the industry, speaking to leading authors, graduate recruiters and career coaches who bring decades of experience into a bite-sized weekly 30-minute-ish show. Put simply, this is a show I wish I had when I graduated. And welcome to the 90th episode of the Graduate Job Podcast, coming to you from coronavirus lockdown in Leeds. Now, not being able to go anywhere means I have more time for the podcast, so every cloud and all of that. And today is a follow-up episode to episode 86, which was a couple of months ago now, where I spoke to Martina Gibbons, recruitment lead for IPS Grow. As a reminder, IPS stands for Individual Placement and Support, and it is an NHS-backed graduate scheme which is rapidly expanding and looking for graduates to join as employment specialists who will help to place people with mental illness in work. In that episode, we explored IPS Grow and its application process in detail. Now have a listen if you haven't already done so. The link is graduatejobpodcast.com/IPS. And in the episode today, we build on the first interview and go deeper as I speak with Charlotte Knighton, who has been working as an employment specialist in London for the last year. Charlotte spills the beans on what it's really like to work as an employment specialist for a trust in London, and what it is that you can expect to be doing on a day-to-day basis. We explore the types of clients you'll be working with and their range of mental health conditions. We touch upon the skills you really need for the role and how you can prepare yourself ahead of your application. Charlotte shares her experience as a graduate going through the application process and her top tips so you can stand out from the crowd, including her absolute number one tip that you need to make sure you are following. Now, no matter where you are in your job search, if you've thought of applying to IPS or not even heard of them, this is an episode which you aren't going to want to miss. Now, the only link that you need to remember from today is graduatejobpodcast.com/IPS2, as that has all of the links to everything which we discuss and a full transcript which you can download. So make sure you head on over there now. Before we start, let's have a quick message from today's sponsor, who are our friends at careergym.com. There are some things in life you can't escape, and psychometric tests when you apply for a graduate job is one of them. Career Gym is the number one place for you to undertake all of your psychometric tests which you will face when you apply for a graduate job. The bottom line is that no matter what graduate job you apply for, from the global giants to that small company around the corner, you're going to have to do some type of verbal, numerical reasoning, situational judgment and working style tests. At careergym.com, you can practice all of these, and they come with detailed explanations, and you can compare yourself against your peers and do them under time pressure. And as a valued listener of the show, they will give you 20% off all of their tests if you use the code GJP, that's capital letters GJP. So head on over to careergym.com and enter GJP to get 20% off all of their tests. Now on with the show. A very warm welcome to my guest today, Charlotte Knighton, Employment Specialist at the Working Well Trust. Charlotte, thank you for joining me on the Graduate Job Podcast.
No problem.
So 2 episodes ago, I explored how to get a job as an employment specialist. So it's great to have you with us to here today so people can hear firsthand what it's really like to work as an employment specialist. So maybe to start off, would you like to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and how long you've been an employment specialist?
Yeah, so I finished university nearly 2 years ago now, and I was then a headhunter for maybe 8 months, and then took some time out to go travelling, and then came back and decided that I wanted to work for a mental health charity. Looked at a lot of different ones, and then Working Well Trust came up, and it really stood out to me because I'd be able to sort of use the skills that I'd learned when I'd been a headhunter. So I applied and got the job in November.
Oh, brilliant. And what was it you studied at university? Was it directly relevant to the current role you have now?
No, it wasn't actually. Completely irrelevant. I studied ancient history.
Okay.
So yeah, completely irrelevant to most things, to be honest, unless you're wanting to be an academic. But enjoyable.
No, I completely understand that. And you mentioned you started as a headhunter post university. Did you enjoy this role? Or was it you enjoyed bits of it and wanted to take that forward, or was it you wanted just a complete change into mental health?
I did. I definitely enjoyed parts of the role, and it was sort of, it was a lovely group of people to work with. But I think I'd always known that where I wanted to go, well, always, I say, sort of towards the end of university, I knew that where I wanted to go really was something to do with mental health. So I think I knew that it wasn't really a long-term thing for me being a headhunter. But I can't regret it at all because I wouldn't have got this job without having done that. Um, so yeah, I definitely learned useful skills that I do use a lot in my job now.
That's brilliant. I mean, every job, no matter what it is, post university, you're going to be picking up some skills that are going to be useful to go forward with, and they're always for the questions, the different application stages. You need that barrel of different experiences that you can bring forward to answer the questions. So, no experience is bad experience.
Yeah, exactly.
So, what do you think going into your current role now? Can you tell people what it is that you do as an employment specialist?
So my role is sort of very simply to support people who have some kind of mental illness into getting paid employment.
Amazing. And how many people would you be working with at any one time? Is it very individual and one to one, or do you have a sort of a big group of people that you're helping simultaneously?
So all the meetings I do are individual one to one, but you have a caseload of people that you work with at any one time. So currently, my caseload is about sort of 25 people, which is quite standard. And you meet all of them sort of one to one. And some of them will be people who are actively looking to get into employment, and then some of those are people that are already in employment, and you're supporting them through that.
And how long do you tend to work with people for? Is it a long-term relationship, or can it be quite short? I guess in terms of when they find a job.
So it tends to be a long-term relationship because one of the principles of IPS is time unlimited support. So you might help someone, support someone to get into a job quite quickly, but then you would work with them once they're in a job to support them for as long as they feel they need.
Oh, brilliant. And would you say that you've got like what would a standard day look like, or are all the days, quite different in terms of what it is you might be doing and where you'll be doing it?
It can vary a lot, but generally my sort of standard day would be to get in, at 9, and then I generally organise sort of 3 to 4 meetings with different clients a day, and they mostly are 1-hour meetings. So sort of try and have them spaced throughout the day. It doesn't always work. Sometimes you end up with sort of back-to-back meetings, which can be a bit difficult. But so you do the meetings with clients, and then sort of all the admin that comes from that. So case notes, and any follow-up from those meetings, like doing sort of finding roles for people to see if it's the type of thing that they'd like to apply for, researching companies, that kind of thing. And then another part of my role is to do what we call employer engagement. So meeting local employers in some way and telling them about our service, and sort of trying to gain information about jobs that they might have available. So yeah, that's sort of a standard day.
And is it fairly desk bound? Are you sort of out and about quite a lot, or I guess does it depend on the day?
Very much depends on the day, but I would say out and about a lot generally, because when you're doing employer engagement, you're generally walking around your local area. So it's really lovely. You get to know the area that you're working in very well, and you get to meet a lot of people. And even if you're having a day where you're not doing employer engagement and you're just meeting people and doing admin, you're always up and down, going to meeting rooms and all that kind of stuff. So it's quite an active job. It's very nice.
It's always good to be away from the desk.
Yeah.
Without going into specifics, are you able to, and mental health is such a broad spectrum, are you able to give listeners a bit of an insight into the type of people that you work with?
Yeah, of course. So it sort of depends which mental health service you're attached to. So as employment specialists, we're all based in different teams. So I personally am based with the psychological therapies service in Tower Hamlets, and from there, a lot of the people that I work with, some have, some will have depression, some will have anxiety, some will have PTSD, and you also have things like personality disorders, psychosis, things like that. It's we work with a huge range of people, and you don't have to have a sort of your mental health condition doesn't have to be specific. It doesn't have to be any particular diagnosis to work with our service. So it's really a whole, like the whole spectrum of mental health, I guess, that we work with, to be honest.
And when you apply to IPS Grow, do you get a choice in terms of which particular service that you go into, or is it just something that's allocated when you get the job?
It was something that was allocated when I got the job. I was actually taking over someone's caseload who had been promoted, so I sort of filled their post where they'd been at the psychological therapy service.
And yeah, as you mentioned, a really broad range of different people that you're going to be dealing with those different conditions.
Yeah. So it's a very broad range of people.
Moving on then to sort of the role itself, what are some of the biggest challenges that you find about the role?
I think one of the biggest challenges is it can obviously be quite emotional work. People can put quite a lot of trust in you, and that can be difficult if you feel like you're if they then say don't get a job that they've interviewed for, and stuff, things like that, where you get quite invested in them, and I think then that also sort of brings a challenge of sort of taking the work home with you emotionally, and it can be difficult to disconnect, I think.
Yeah. And do IPS Grow help with that in terms of giving you training or support to help with those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think as sort of, especially the place I work for, Working on Trust, it's a very good environment, and it's very much encouraged that you don't work outside of hours. We have quite strict sort of 9 to 4:30, and we've got work phones, so you turn them off when you leave the office, that kind of thing. There's not really a culture of doing work outside of hours.
That sounds good. And I know in the graduate jobs I've done, that's something that not all companies take seriously, and the opposite is true, and often encouraging you to take work home, and definitely to work into your free time. So it's good that your trust taking that seriously.
Yeah.
Conversely, then, what are some of the things that you really enjoy most about the role?
I think meetings with clients, Yeah, I think that's just the highlight for me. It makes the day go so quickly when you have meetings with clients, because an hour sort of goes in hardly any time, and you can every meeting is different because everyone has different sort of support needs. So yeah, I think having client meetings as the focus of the role makes it a very varied and interesting role, and you get that kind of nice feeling that you're supporting someone who needs the support. So yeah.
With the coaching that I do with helping people to get graduate jobs, it's always so exciting when they send me a text saying that they've got the job that they've gone for. So I can imagine the same thing for you and clients you've been working with, especially over a long time period. Get that role must be really fulfilling.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very fulfilling job to have, especially when it goes right.
No, of course. So what skills do you think make a good employment specialist?
I think empathy is really important. You've got to be able to listen to someone talk about the difficulties that they're going through, and sort of not shy away from that. And I also think resilience is extremely important, because things aren't always going to go right. There are going to be things that mean your clients are disappointed, and you've got to be resilient sort of in yourself to be able to support them through that. And I think that's really important.
No, completely. And do you think there are any misconceptions that people might have about the role and what it is that you do?
Yeah, I think maybe, confusing perhaps what we do with sort of like a work coach at a job centre. So what an employment specialist role is to make sure that the job search you do with your clients is very specific to what they want. It's in line with their job preferences, and we're not forcing anyone into work. People come to us voluntarily who would like support in getting into work. So I think that's one, and then I think there's also the idea that we'll be helping people to get into sort of supported placements and sheltered work and that kind of stuff, when one of the IPS principles is getting people into competitive paid employment. So yeah, I think that's quite key.
What do you wish that you'd known about the role before you'd started it?
Oh, I think maybe that I wouldn't just waltz in and start getting people jobs left, right, and centre. That it's a real process, and it's a big learning curve starting this job, and you've got to give yourself time to settle into the job and work out what kind of methods work best to help people to get into jobs. So I think maybe that for me, it would have been useful to know that I needed to give myself a bit of time when I first started the job, and not expect myself to be getting people into jobs, in the first month.
No, that's really good advice, and holds true for any graduate job that people go for. Is just to set your expectations at the beginning. So just as you said, the steep learning curve. There's always a learning curve. So just to understand where you are, and as you say, go through the process for helping people. So speaking of the process, maybe then let's flip to the application process. Can you remember back what it was like when you were applying for the trust you're with? Did you apply to one specific trust, or did you apply to multiple ones?
So I applied specifically to Working Well Trust. So the process for it was actually quite it was a fairly simple application process, which was very welcome, because at the time I was doing a lot of job applications, and sometimes you get to the end of those application forms that are 15 pages long, and you just, it's horrendous. Whereas this was quite a simple sort of CV and cover letter, at least for my trust it was. And then I had a phone interview, which actually I nearly missed because the email for it went to my spam folder. So that would be a piece of advice for any graduates. If you're applying for jobs, check your spam folder.
That's definitely a good piece of advice.
Yeah, so I had a interview over the phone where they explained a bit about the IPS process to me, and then asked me some sort of situational questions. How would you deal with X situation? Bearing in mind what they told me about the IPS principles, and I hadn't quite expected that in my phone interview. So yeah, that was a bit of a surprise for me, but obviously went okay. I didn't completely fluff it. And then after that, I was invited to a face-to-face interview, and they asked me to prepare a presentation about IPS for that, which initially I was really I was very nervous about, because I think I didn't have much time to prepare the presentation. But actually, it was really useful because it meant that I did a whole load of research into IPS and the principles behind it, because it's quite, you couldn't wing an interview about IPS because there's a lot of research behind it, and there's sort of the principles that you need to learn. So having initially been slightly horrified that I was going to have to do a presentation, it was really useful to have done. And I think it made the interview go a lot more smoothly because I had sort of definite things to prepare for. So yeah, I did that interview, did the presentation, and then they asked me some more sort of situational questions, and then they called me later that afternoon offering me the job. So that, yeah, it was quite a nice process.
Oh, brilliant! And it's always good when you hear back quickly. One of the clients I've been working with, it was 2 weeks after the assessment centre they finally got back to him to offer him the job. So we'd naturally assumed he hadn't got it since it was 2 weeks' notice. But yeah, it's good when you hear back the same day. When I spoke with Martina Gibbons for the episode, the first interview with IPS, she talked about the role play during the assessment centre. Did you have a role play situation?
I don't think I had a role play situation, but I was asked a lot of the interview was focused on, say you have a client who wants XYZ, how would you go about doing this? Or, asking me how I deal with potential difficult situations that could come up. I don't think I had a role play. It would be embarrassing if I did now, and I just can't remember it.
Had you any sort of previous experience working in a mental health capacity, or was this your first role?
So this was my first role that was anything mental health related.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned earlier about your previous role as a headhunter. So were a lot of the questions recruitment focused that you were able to bring in, or was it just more the sort of general experience you gained as a headhunter?
I think it was sort of more about the general experience that I'd gained. And I think it was quite a nice interview in terms of they gave me a lot of these situations and asked how I deal with them, so I could use my experience from being a headhunter to answer those questions without sort of having to do the slightly awkward, I learnt this from doing this, blah blah blah. It felt like a more natural way of showing your experience.
Yep. No, that sounds very true. And which parts of the application did you find most challenging?
I think sort of preparing the presentation was probably the most challenging bit for me, because generally I'm I quite like presentations, to be honest, but this is obviously, I was quite invested in getting this job. I'd never done a presentation for something where the outcome would have such a sort of direct effect on me. So I think for me that was the most challenging part, and because there's quite a lot of research to do on the IPS principles, and trying to memorize that so you're not sort of just reading off a PowerPoint in quite a short space of time. That was definitely challenging.
So listeners, if you're applying, make sure you know those IPS principles like the back of your hand, so you're able to recall them nice and easy when it comes to the assessment centre stage.
Yep, definitely.
And did you have to do any of the dreaded verbal or numerical reasoning or situational judgment tests?
I didn't know, which was such a relief for me. Yeah, no, none of that.
You've got off lightly then, so
Yeah.
that's good to know. So, what advice would you give someone who's going through the process now and applying to IPS Grow?
Learn the 8 principles. I think, yeah, if you can, especially if you haven't been in anything sort of related to this before, I think just learn the principles so that you can relate your answers in interviews back to them. So, you can say things like, oh, because of the principle of doing a rapid job search, I would do X, Y, Z, just to show that you know what you're applying for, you know what IPS is. It's not sort of a normal employment service.
That's quality advice there. And listeners, just to say that you'll be able to find a full transcript of everything that we talked about today and links to everything that we discuss over in the show notes at graduatejobpodcast.com/IPS2. So, Charlotte, once you've got the job then, what was the next stage? Do they get everybody, all the new recruits into IPS Grow together, or is it just done then on a sort of trust-by-trust basis?
I think it's just done on a trust-by-trust basis, yeah. So I sort of started, because I was taking over a caseload, kind of, it was quite nice to sort of hit the ground running, and had my sort of induction. I think my induction lasted 2 or 3 weeks, maybe. And in that, I did a lot of shadowing my colleagues, so shadowing them in client meetings, in registration meetings, and shadowing them doing employer engagement, just to sort of get an idea of how that worked.
Yeah, that's a nice long period, 2 or 3 weeks, just so you can learn about the job as opposed to just being dumped in at the deep end, which is always a worry. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, I think my induction was managed sort of very well, because I had a lot of client handovers with the person whose caseload I was taking over. So I sort of took people over one at a time. So it was quite gradual, and with the shadowing, I felt like by the time I actually started doing the job properly, I felt like I'd already seen how to do all of the aspects of the job. So the shadowing was really important.
And in terms looking further into the future then, is there a structured role progression for employment specialists in terms of where you'll be in 3, 5, 10 years' time?
To be honest, I'm not entirely sure. Obviously, it takes quite a while to get into the role of employment specialist. And, I think you'll probably be at your best doing that role after a year, a couple of years with experience. And then you can sort of go into roles that involve management as well, I guess. But yeah, I don't necessarily know specifics about sort of what the steps are.
Sound, as you said, the more experience you have, just the easier these things are and the more skills you get. So, Charlotte, moving on to the weekly staple questions. So I sprung these on you today. So what one book would you recommend to someone applying to IPS Grow?
Yeah, I didn't know about this one, because I've never really read a book that would sort of be related to it. So I don't know if this is a bit of a cop-out saying this, so tell me if I should give a different answer. But I think any book that helps you to relax and sort of switch off, because especially if you're doing a lot of applications to different things, it's very stressful. And then once you're in the job, it's, I've said that it's quite a sort of, it can be quite an emotionally draining job. And read any book that helps you to relax. So personally, I would recommend Harry Potter. But yeah, I'm not really sure about a book that's sort of IPS related.
No, that's a good answer, and yeah, especially if you pick one of the later Harry Potters, there's plenty there to keep you get your teeth into. They're fairly chosty tomes, so no, that's a good answer. So I'll let you off with that one. And then next question: what one internet resource would you recommend?
So actually, probably the Centre for Mental Health, their website has a whole section on IPS resources and the IPS principles, which is really useful. And they also run sort of the IPS courses as well. And it's good, just sort of simple information, quite clearly put. And that's what I use to help me do my presentation for the interview. So all the 8 principles are on there.
Excellent, and I will make sure that is linked to in the show notes over at graduatejobpodcast.com/IPS2. So that sounds like a treasure trove of information there. And finally, what one tip would you give someone who's applying to IPS Grow?
I think don't be afraid of using any of your own experience of mental health, or friends or family's experience of struggling with their mental health to sort of give you ideas for what to write in your application or to say in interviews. Because actually I think any type of experience with supporting someone or supporting yourself through a difficult period of mental health will be beneficial in the role.
That's really good advice, and yeah, bringing just your own personality and your own background and experience into any application is a good idea, and especially for IPS Grow. So yeah, that's a really nice point for us to finish the interview on. Charlotte, thank you so much for appearing on the Graduate Job Podcast.
No problem at all. Thank you for having me.
Many thanks again to Charlotte for her time today. I hope that gave you a more in-depth flavour of IPS Grow and what to expect in the role as an employment specialist. It certainly sounds an interesting role, and you can't go wrong with roles where you're going to be making a difference in people's lives. If you do apply to IPS Grow and want some coaching and help with your application, drop me a line at hello@graduatejobpodcast.com and I'd be happy to help. Let me know if you like the episode today, and I'll look to get some recent grads from some of the companies that we've had on the show, and I'll see if I can speak to them so we can learn what it is really like and what you'll be doing on a day-to-day basis. So that is everything from today. Show notes, as I mentioned, are at graduatejobpodcast.com/IPS2. And all that remains is to say, I hope you enjoyed the episode today, but more importantly, I hope you use it and apply it. See you next week.